The red sand of Coulter 7 stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the jagged crystalline formations that jutted from the ground like broken teeth. Arya Voss knelt in the shadow of one such formation, her survival suit torn at the shoulder, dried blood crusting the fabric. Around her, 6 pairs of luminescent eyes watched from the dimness. The Vraken cubs, they shouldn't have been there. According to every xenobiological survey, every cultural database, every warning the Galactic Council had issued about Coulter 7, the Vraken were apex predators, territorial, aggressive, and utterly intolerant of outsiders. Their adults stood 3 meters tall, covered in midnight black fur that absorbed light itself, with claws that could rend through starship hull plating. They hunted in coordinated packs and had never, in the 2 centuries since first contact, allowed another species to approach their young. Yet here Arya was, surrounded by 6 orphaned cubs, the smallest no larger than a terrier, the largest reaching her waist. And they refused to leave. That it had been 3 days since the crash. 3 days since the mining vessel she'd been surveying on had hit an unexpected debris field and torn apart in Coulter's atmosphere. 3 days since she'd dragged herself from the wreckage, the only survivor, and stumbled into a crystalline canyon where she'd found the cubs huddled around the cooling body of what must have been their mother. The first rule of survival on an alien world: avoid the wildlife. The second rule: never, ever approach predator young. Arya had broken both rules without hesitation. That she'd seen the wounds on the mother's body. Blast marks from plasma rifles. Poachers. The Vraken pelts fetched obscene prices on black markets across 3 sectors. These cubs had watched their mother die defending them, and now they were alone, confused, and starving. Arya had stayed. The smallest one, she'd started calling him Miko after he'd refused to leave her side even for a moment, pressed against her leg now, his fur surprisingly soft despite its ominous coloring. His siblings circled restlessly, their hunger palpable. Arya reached into her emergency pack and pulled out another protein ration bar, breaking it into pieces with hands that trembled from exhaustion. "I know it's not what you're supposed to eat," she murmured, offering a piece to Miko. His small jaws, already lined with developing fangs, took it gently from her palm. "But it's all I've got." The cubs had learned quickly. On the first day, they'd been wary, hissing and backing away from her offered food. By the second day, desperation had overcome instinct. Now, on the third day, they gathered around her like she was the pack leader, taking turns accepting the pieces she distributed with careful fairness. That's when she heard it, that a low rumble that vibrated through the crystal formations and into her bones. The cubs' ears, still too large for their heads, swiveled toward the sound. Miko pressed closer to Arya, a small whimper escaping his throat. The alpha pack had arrived. They emerged from between the crystals like shadows given form. 12 adult Vraken, each a monument to evolutionary perfection in killing. The largest, presumably the alpha, stood at the front, its eyes burning with that same luminescent quality as the cubs, but cold, calculating, lethal. Intelligence gleamed there, the kind that had allowed the Vraken to develop primitive tools and complex social structures despite never achieving spaceflight. Every instinct screamed at Arya to run. Her legs tensed, her heart hammered against her ribs. The survival suit's biomonitor shrieked warnings about her elevated stress levels directly into her inner ear, but Miko was still pressed against her leg. The other cubs had frozen, looking between the approaching adults and Arya with uncertainty. If she ran, they'd scatter. They'd be vulnerable. And she'd spent 3 days keeping them alive. Arya Voss did something that would have made every exobiologist in the known galaxy call her insane. She stayed exactly where she was, broke another protein bar, and continued feeding the cubs. The alpha pack stopped 10 meters away. The massive leader tilted its head, studying her with an intensity that suggested it was cataloging every detail. Her posture, her actions, the way the cubs responded to her. Its pack mates shifted restlessly, claws scraping against stone, muscles coiled and ready to spring. Arya's hands didn't shake as she offered another piece to the cub on her right. "It's okay," she whispered, not to the adults, but to the youngsters. "Just finish eating." Seconds stretched into minutes. The alpha pack remained motionless, watching. The cubs, reassured by Arya's calm, continued accepting the food. Miko even made a small chirping sound, contentment, maybe, or just acknowledgement of a full stomach. When the last piece was distributed and accepted, Arya slowly stood. Her legs protested after hours of kneeling, but she kept her movements deliberate, non-threatening. She kept her eyes on the Alpha, not in challenge, but in acknowledgement. One pack leader to another. Understanding flickered in those luminescent eyes. The Alpha made a sound, not a growl, but something deeper, more complex. A call. The cub's ears perked up, and slowly, one by one, they left Arya's side and moved toward the pack. All except Miko. The smallest cub looked up at Arya, then back at the Alpha, clearly torn. Arya knelt one final time, running her hand over Miko's soft head. "Go on," she said gently. "That's your family. They'll take care of you now." Miko licked her hand once, his tongue rough but the gesture unmistakable, and then trotted toward the waiting pack. The Alpha watched the cub join the others, then turned its gaze back to Arya. For a long moment, Human and Vrakan regarded each other. Then, impossibly, the massive creature dipped its head, just slightly, but distinctly. A gesture of respect, the pack turned and melted back into the crystal formations, the cubs safe among their own kind. Arya stood alone in the red sand, her emergency beacon finally starting to ping with an incoming rescue signal. She'd broken every rule, defied every warning, acted on pure human instinct rather than cold logic. And she'd survived something that should have killed her a dozen times over. Because humans, the galaxy was slowly learning, had an inexplicable ability to see beyond survival instincts, to choose compassion even when fear would be more logical, to earn respect from the most unlikely sources. Even from apex predators who had never bowed to anyone. As the rescue shuttle's lights appeared on the horizon, Arya smiled. Somewhere in those crystal canyons, Miko was safe. That was enough. That was everything.